Okay, we're ready to start the last sessions of the day. So thanks for coming, and please join me in welcoming Jerome from Malwarebytes to talk about Tech Support 2.0.
Hi everyone, thanks for coming today. So my presentation is titled Tech Support Scams 2.0. It's sort of a continuation of the work that was done a couple years ago at VB in Dallas. A little bit about me. I'm a senior security researcher at Malwarebytes. I primarily work on honeypots and exploits, but I also investigate scams in general, and especially tech support scams. I attended VB 2008 in Ottawa and VB 2009 in Geneva. And I was born in France, but I live in Canada. On our agenda today, I'll tell you how I got into the whole tech support scam thing. But I'll do a brief history for those that are not too familiar with it. I'll also go into how it's not just affecting Windows and India, but also Mac and Android, and the US are also at stake. Then we'll dig into what I call the theme scams, which are highly targeted and aggressive. And the core of the presentation, something I really wanted to share with you guys, because you're also security researchers, is about intelligence gathering, how we can track and report scammers in an efficient manner. And finally, I'll show you some resources that you're free to use or share with other people, especially family members. So I'll tell you about my experience and how I got into this. I was working for Malwarebytes as a contractor from home, and I received a call from somebody that pretended to be working for Microsoft. He said that my computer was sending viruses and he wanted to log in to do a quick diagnosis. So I let him in, and he rapidly showed me some viruses and other errors on a perfectly clean system, which happened to be a virtual machine. Of course, he demanded money to fix the problem, and I had played the whole part pretty innocently and without teasing or trolling him. But when it came to paying, I declined. The scammer must have felt that he wasted his time on me, because that's when things got really nasty. He started by trashing my virtual machine. So he didn't know it was a virtual machine, but he went into the documents folder and deleted all the documents. And then he went for the drivers and went to delete the Ethernet driver to essentially sever my internet connection. But right before he did that, he was kind enough to leave me a nice message. So, as you can imagine, this was a pretty traumatic experience for me. I don't get called names like that every day. So that's when I started to actually pay attention into the problem. And I realized that there are, in fact, thousands of victims every single day. And I started reading testimonials and experiences from other people. And some of them are really heartbreaking. There's especially retired people that are on a pension, on a tight budget, that are getting conned for several $100s, or single moms that are also financially struggling. And when you see that, it's hard to stay indifferent and not actually want to do something about the problem. So a little bit of an history on cold calls. They typically impersonate Microsoft, or as they sometimes claim, Windows. They mainly originate from India. They use scare tactics to force the user into letting them into their computers. And once in, they identify fake errors and viruses. Their tools of predilection are the Eventviewer or the task manager. They also require payment to fix the issues, and that represents a significant amount of money. Has been going on at least since 2008. At least that's when the Guardian in the UK wrote a big article about it. Now, another thing that people may not be aware of are toll-free numbers. I like to also call them premium tech support. Contrary to cold calls, which are pretty random, these toll-free numbers, they're based on advertising campaigns, on popular search engines, or pop-ups for common things that people may be looking for. For example, if their computer is slow or they're having trouble installing the Flash player. There are also various upsells from registry cleaners and PC utilities. And most importantly, it's a very well-rehearsed sales pitch. You'll find that these companies, before even being a tech support company, they're a sales company. There's probably 80% sales and maybe 20% tech support. It's highly profitable as well. So if we compare the two, the cold calls and the toll-free numbers, there's no advertising for cold calls. The average order value is about $200. Conversion rates are low because it's not really targeted, it's automated, and people tend to get suspicious. They mainly originate from India. On the other side, toll-free numbers, the advertising cost can be high. Again, it's a budget, so you can invest as much as you want. The average order value is about $300, but interestingly, the conversion rates are quite high. Countries of origin tend to be India, but also, most importantly, the US. So, as I said, it's not just Windows and India. Mac and Android users are also targeted, and there is a rapid growth in the US. For Mac users, you'd think it'd be more difficult finding errors because supposedly Macs are more secure. But the scammers use very basic tricks. For example, they'll open a command line terminal and ping a site called protection.com. This site had disabled this type of request, so it gets a request timeout. That's enough for the scammers to say that you don't have AV on your Mac. Most people will actually believe them. They can also use the Mac console, which has all the logs, and I compare it to the Eventlog on Windows. It's just as effective for a scammer to use. For Android users, they're also targeted. There's advertising on popular search engines and specific sites that are built for phones and tablets. When you call the number, they ask you to plug in your device into your computer, and then that gives them the opportunity to run a scan of your machine. Of course, they're going to find viruses, and then they'll say that your entire network and all the devices in your home network are compromised. As far as the US goes, it's primarily, I would be inclined to say entirely toll-free numbers driven. Cold calls don't really happen for legal reasons. I think it's too risky. But they are using the same tactics as their Indian counterparts. And that's pretty sad. The packages they sell tend to be more expensive, but they also offer better after-sales support. So let me explain this a little bit. The sales pitch, while they're using various tactics to convince the mark and lie to them, it's in their interest to provide decent service. I'm clear that it's not worth the value that you're paying for, but they want the person to leave with a good impression. They don't want bad testimonials or reports to the Business Bureau or the FTC. So in the long-term interest of those scam business, it's better to pretend having a legit operation and end the relationship with the customer on a happy note. It's a multi-million-dollar industry, and from my own experience, I've documented that it's mostly located in Florida, especially the southeast Florida, Boca Raton area. Now, there's a subject that I'm kind of like to talk about. I find very sneaky. It's what I call the upsell path. You'll be downloading a registry cleaner or a PC utility, and very soon after you've run it, you'll be bombarded with various messages. They all want you to call a toll-free support number. Perhaps you purchased the software for $29 and they sent you a license key. Well, a lot of companies will bury the license key in an email at the very end with a tiny font so you can't read it. At the top of the email will be the toll-free number to call. What happens is those people call and then they got conned into buying $400 worth of premium support packages that they don't actually need. This is something that the US companies are using all the time. Now, theme scams are a variation that's really interesting because you see the creativity of the scammers. They leverage popular brands. They can be location and time sensitive. And they're really effective because they're targeted. Surprisingly, they can be combined with malware and even phishing. To me, that makes the scammers not just people that lie to you, but full-fledged criminals. This one I found during tax season. For people that have the Quicken software or similar accounting software, and you have an issue with, this company was providing tech support services. So you call them, and what's interesting about them is that they'll run a scan. In my case, it was on a Mac, and find all these errors that I showed earlier with the console. And they'll tell you that you need to first fix your Mac, and then they can work on the Quicken software. So at the end of the day, they sell you packages that you don't actually need. And this was timed right around April when it was the tax deadline. Perhaps more aggressive are the fake infection pop-ups. These are ad-driven. They're very annoying. They often come with sound effects to scare people into believing there's something wrong with their computers. They're actually hard to close because they contain JavaScript code that loops infinitely and prevents people from quitting those pop-ups. And you can tell that, emergency tech support, yeah, there's not really such thing. There's tons of variations on this. The colors, the themes, just never ending. This one we found, I think about a year ago or so. It was a phishing site for Netflix. What it did is it captured your username and password, which is typical phishing. But what surprised me, because I was expecting to be redirected to the real Netflix site afterwards, is this. This was a notice that my Netflix account had been blocked or suspended, and I had to call this phone number in order to restore it. So not only did the scammers steal my credentials, now they were trying to fool me into calling this number to sell me support packages. This one we found recently. So some scammer decided to copycat popular AV and anti-malware sites and created all these different sites that look exactly like the original ones. What I found pretty interesting is how they replace our phone number with their own toll-free number on all the sites. And the downloads for each of the software was also replaced with their own installer, which if you install it, you go through the same user license agreement, choose your path to install the software, except halfway through the installation, you get a message telling you that it can't install the product because your computer needs to be cleaned first. You have to call that number. That was pretty good, I thought. So now I'm entering the second phase of this presentation, which is about intelligence gathering. As you may have guessed, I haven't just waited to receive phone calls at my house. I've actually gone on the offensive side, and I'm tracking all the ads, all the companies that are doing these scams. So I've documented the process of doing that to make it efficient for me, but also to perhaps encourage other people to report and investigate in the same fashion. So I'm going to share some of the tips and things I've learned along the way. The first thing you need to do is prepare your environment. So this is your software, your hardware, and even your physical environment. You want to be in a place, for example, where you're not going to be disturbed. You can make the call when you're relaxed, and you're going to be able to conduct what I call the sting operation. You want to create a persona. For each thing that I do, I create a different persona, different name, different email address, different location. I don't want to give away who I am. I have no interest. I also use disposable phone numbers. You don't want to use your home phone number. I think it's pretty obvious, but that's actually probably one of the most difficult parts because you need to constantly be rotating phone number, and you can't use a lot of the voice over IP services, such as Google Voice. These tend to be blocked or even detected as non-real phone numbers. there are various number of apps on the iPhone, for example, you can use to create a legitimate looking phone number for free. That's what I use. I also use audio and video recording software that allows me to capture the evidence. This is especially helpful because when you're in a call, you're not necessarily paying attention to all the details, and something might just escape you, or you didn't see the scammer do something. So having that recorded, you can go back after and actually review what happened. Give yourself at least half an hour. If you're good at it, you can get it done and capture the evidence pretty quickly. But you have to be ready for the unexpected. And what I try and do is always leave the call on good terms. I strongly advise against trolling scammers, calling them names, or anything like that. You may want to, but I think personally I play the long game. I collect the evidence, I report it, and I terminate them. It's much more effective than the release, the natural impulsion you have to, you may have to swear at them. So you can find an excuse to leave on good terms. It could be, you want to think about it, or you're going to call back later, anything like that. You want to build a legitimate looking environment, Windows 7, Windows 8. Install all the updates, the firewall, but you want to make sure the PC looks like it's been used. Browse a little bit, install some programs. This is important, though, that the PC has to be clean. The purpose of the experiment is trying to get the scammer to tell you that your machine is infected, so it better be clean, otherwise it defeats the purpose. But at the same time, assume that the machine may be compromised. The scammers have been known to put malware or try and destroy your machine, so don't leave any network drives or anything that could compromise you. And finally, maybe you could use also a VPN to actually disguise your real IP address. The remote software will record both IP addresses. Now, this is an interesting point. During this conference, several people have talked about VM detection, how malware can evade detection. Well, scammers evade detections too. One of the things that they'll look for is if you have VirtualBox or VMware installed. They'll look in the tray to see if the guest editions are installed. They'll also look in the device manager to see what type of hard disk you have. And these are dead giveaways. And when they find it, which has happened to me, it's pretty hard to come with a plausible response why this is actually a real system. Other things, such as the installation date, they'll often tell you, when did you buy the computer and such like things. If it doesn't match with what they find doing this system info command, that's kind of a giveaway as well. And there's also other giveaways which you can find in the BIOS that reveal if it's a virtual machine. Now, the good thing is, at least with VirtualBox, you can change those. There's utilities from the command line using VBOX manage that allow you to override this. So I've done that on a machine that's called Acer, and I've replaced everything, so it looks legitimate. As far as hard drives are concerned, and that's happened to me, all this has happened to me. I created a machine with 25 gigs of space because I don't want to use too much space. But one of the tech support guys said, no, that doesn't look real. And he was right. You can't buy a PC in a store with only 25 gigs. So, make sure it has at least 300 or 500 gigabytes of disk. You can use dynamic disk, so it doesn't fill all your hard drive right away. Now, one thing I like to do is place what I call bait documents on the desktop or other places. These are files that look very attractive, banking, passwords. They're not just typical files. If you open the file, it will reveal your IP address and other sensitive information about your machine. I'll tell later where I got this, because you can actually get it already pre-configured for you. The fun part is harvesting the data. You want to save the video recording for evidence. Also save the ID that they use for the remote control software. Save their IP address. Identify the payment processor. And with all that information, you can report it to the appropriate people or organizations, knowing that every single piece of evidence is useful in disturbing the scammers in some way. So when I showed you earlier about the bait documents, this is what I was talking about. This is a service called HoneyDocs. It lets you download templates, Excel files, doc files, and you can add your own information. You create an account, and once the scammers steal the document, which they did in a case for me, and then they open them, it'll tell you their IP address, their city, the country, and even latitude and longitude. And for each attempt, they open the document. Now, I did another case at one time because they did not want to take the document, the bait document. So I naively told them my username and password for my Gmail address, a fake one, of course. And shortly after our call ended, the scammer actually logged into my Gmail account. Now, there's this cool feature in Gmail that shows you the recent activity, and I was able to identify the IP. The previous one you see here is actually me using a VPN from India to not trigger Gmail saying, oh, you're not logging for a familiar location. So that's how I got the IP. Another way is to look in the logs for the remote control software, whether it's TeamViewer or LogMeIn. One thing you need to know is, especially with LogMeIn, once the session ends, the log file, which is often in a temporary location, will be deleted. So what I try to do is first convince the technician that I'm trying to install LogMeIn, but it's not working. Oh, by the way, I've got this other one called TeamViewer installed already from a previous technician. Can we use that? It's already installed on my box. I'm in control, and I've got the log on my machine, and there's nothing we can do. And a lot of the time, they'll accept and say, all right, we'll connect using TeamViewer, and I can capture the IP. So from all this data we collected, we're able to map a little bit, for example, in India, where some of the popular locations, to be honest, it's all over the country. There's just some locations that are more active. There must be more tech support centers. As far as the US is concerned, mainly Florida. We caught one in Utah, but that was kind of an exception to the rule, I think. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about some resources. The first one is on our blog, Malwarebytes Unpacked. We have a section called Scams. This is really helpful if you have family members and they don't really know what it's about. It tells them the tricks they're using. It's got screenshots and a lot of information, especially if they have been victim, what to do, how to contact their bank or report, the fraud. That's really helpful. We've also created a tech support scam blacklist. I've realized that there was no such thing. I mean, there's blacklist of everything, but not for tech support companies that are involved in scams. And we use these criteria to determine whether they are legitimate or not. For example, if they pretend to be working for Microsoft, if they find viruses on a clean system. These are typical things. And from that, we can then blacklist the company. This was one in the US called EraserTech. These were their websites, their phone numbers. They were using an affiliate site, which was one of those red warnings, playing a sound. Captured their LogMeIn ID, reported to LogMeIn. The reason for blacklisting, the incident date, and yeah. So we catalog them, and if somebody wants to contest, or we can go back to them and show them all the evidence we have. Other resources. So I'm listing here, if you want to report the fraud based on your country, in the US, the FTC in Canada, anti-fraud, action fraud in the UK, or ScamWatch in Australia. There is a coalition that I recently came across, which is called Trust in Ads. It has some of the major internet companies part of it, and it deals with everything that is misleading or malicious ads. So if you find some of these ads on Bing or on Google that you find is misleading, then you can contact them and they can take it down. The Eventlog, maintained by David Harley, has a good timeline of everything that's tech support scam related, so I find it's a good index. And if you want to report to TeamViewer and log me in, they're well aware that their services are abused by scammers, and they're usually pretty good at shutting them down. So if you give them the ID that was used during the scam, they can tie it to your company and terminate their license. That's about it. If you have any questions, let me know. We've got 5 minutes for questions.